Launch initiated.
The autocannon. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. Or is it? Across the 2-year lifespan of Helldivers 2, the autocannon has seen surprisingly few balance changes compared to most other weapons in the game. But that doesn't mean it's weak. In fact, the autocannon is still a very capable weapon. It's just one that a lot of players misunderstand. But today I want to talk about what the autocannon actually is, where it came from, how its role has evolved over time, and why it's still a very solid weapon if you understand how to use it. As someone who used to main the autocannon and has watched it rise and fall in popularity over the last 2 years, I want to break it down how it actually stacks up in the current game. When Helldivers 2 first launched, the autocannon was incredibly strong, especially on the automaton front. It was basically a Swiss Army knife. You could use it against almost anything: Devastators, Hulks, tanks, turrets, even factory striders if you shot them in the belly. With good positioning, you could flank the tanks and turrets, and you could even kill the factory strider in only about 8 shots to the belly. If you position well and use the autocannon intelligently, it can still do all of those things. It's just not quite as efficient at doing it as it used to be. Plus, there's also these things called war striders now, which kind of put a wrench in the works a lot of the time. Back in the day, the number of explosive weapons that we had that were viable to be used was pretty short-lived, so the autocannon had a huge advantage back then. Back at launch, bot fabricators could only be destroyed through the vent. You couldn't just shoot them from any angle like you can today with anti-tank weapons. Weapons like the recoilless rifle, quasar cannon, expendable anti-tank couldn't destroy them outright. Well, you'd have to use the anti-tank weapons on the vent back then, and that seemed like a waste because anti-tank was a precious commodity back in the day. But if you're interested in that history lesson, that's a whole nother video. Anyway, point is, if you hit the vent from range with the autocannon, you can destroy bot fabricators safely from a distance, something very few weapons could do at the time. This made the autocannon extremely versatile. Then came the 6-day plan balance update. This was a massive rework of the entire game's balance. Armor values were lowered across many heavy enemies such as Hulks, Chargers, Biotitans, but health values were increased significantly. This changed how weapons interacted with enemies, and a lot of weapons got compensation buffs to boot. But here's the important part: the autocannon didn't really get any changes. So while other weapons were adjusted to fit the new system, the autocannon kind of stayed the same, which effectively meant it got indirectly nerfed. So when it went from being one of the strongest weapons in the game to feeling more average, not bad, but not exceptional either. That's when a lot of players started abandoning it in favor of things like the recoilless rifle, especially for the automaton front. So at the end of the 60-day plan, the autocannon received one of the biggest changes it's ever gotten. Flak ammo mode was added. This gave the weapon a second firing mode. Originally, the autocannon was only known as a weapon for killing heavy targets, but flak mode shifted its role. Now it had a dedicated anti-chaff mode designed to deal with groups of enemies, and this created something of an identity crisis. Players who were used to the autocannon being a heavy killer suddenly had a weapon that seemed split between 2 different roles. And even today, over a year later, I still think a lot of players misunderstand what this weapon is actually best at. So there's APHET, which is the heavy armor penetration, and flak. Let's break them down. APHET rounds deal 325 projectile damage and 150 explosive damage in a very small radius. The projectile has heavy armor penetration, while the explosion only has medium armor penetration. That means the projectile can punch through heavy armor, but the explosive component is more effective against medium targets. This is your go-to mode for any heavy enemies or automaton objectives like mortars or anti-air and some other structures. On the other hand, flak mode is a bit more complex. When you fire a flak round, several different damages occur. First, the projectile hits for 150 ballistic damage with light armor penetration. Then the round detonates, creating a small explosion that deals 190 explosive damage with medium armor penetration. But the real power comes from the shrapnel. Each flak round spawns 30 pieces of shrapnel, and each piece deals 110 ballistic damage at medium armor penetration. That means the total damage potential from the shrapnel alone is 3,300 damage. Now realistically, you're not going to hit every piece of shrapnel, but even if only half of that damage lands, or even a little bit less than half, it's still an enormous amount of damage spread across multiple targets, which is why flak mode is extremely effective against groups of medium enemies. For example, I personally believe flak mode is better at dealing with groups of devastators than APHET, but, you know, a lot of people don't seem to believe that, but whenever I tell them that, but they're like, no, you need the armor pen. I'm like, no, you don't. Just use flak. It's so much more damage. Anyway, flak mode is also extremely strong against the other factions as well. On the Illuminate front, it handles flesh mobs very effectively. Most can be cleared out in about 3 to 5 rounds, depending on how many shrapnel hits you get. That's for the flesh mobs. If you encounter heavier enemies like the harvesters, you can simply switch back to the APHET mode and target their weak points, which is usually like the armpit or the legs in general. The autocannon is also excellent for destroying spawners. This includes, you know, bug holes, bot fabricators, as we already discussed, the grounded illuminate warp ships. I just want to make a quick note about the flak because it is a proximity detonation fuse. Sometimes it detonates prematurely before destroying a spawner, so switch to APHET if you're having trouble getting the projectile to go into the bug hole or bot vent or the grounded illuminate warp ships. I found this to be sometimes inconsistent, usually because the game thinks there's like a dead body or something in the way and it's detonating on that instead of the actual thing. Anyway, as long as you aim for the correct weak point, vent stores, or openings with the AFET, you should be good. I just also want to make a faction-specific note about flak as well for the bug front. When targeting shrieker nests or spore spewers, aim just below the brim of the mushroom at the top of the stem. This maximizes your shrapnel damage, and you'll kill it much faster than APHET. And you can do this from well with outside of the shrieker nest spawner range. So if you're like at 200 meters out, you can fire and kill the shrieker nest without even any shrieker spawning at all, which is pretty awesome. Alright, so here's some tactical gameplay tips. The autocannon works best when used from range. It's not quite a sniper weapon, but it absolutely benefits from distance. Weapon has surprisingly good accuracy in range, and staying further away gives you breathing room when you need to reload, which is important because the autocannon has a stationary reload. If you're standing in the middle of a swarm when that happens, things can go very badly. But if you're positioned behind your team or at a distance, you can reload much more safely and provide support to your team. Think of yourself as a support player when running the autocannon. Your job is to clear medium enemies, thin out waves, protect teammates, and look for objectives you can take out. You help anti-tank players by keeping the crowds off them, and you support close quarters teammates by reducing the number of enemies they have to deal with. Say this is the autocannon's true identity in the current state of the game. It's no longer the heavy hitter it used to be, but it is quite good at taking out crowds now. This next tip might be obvious to many, but new players probably don't know about it, so I'm going to have to talk about it. One very important mechanic of the autocannon is the reload behavior. So if the autocannon runs completely empty, the reload animation includes a long chambering step. But if you leave one round in the weapon, you completely skip that step, tactical reload, which makes the reload significantly faster. So the trick is simple. Never fully empty the magazine if you can avoid it. You reload the autocannon 5 rounds at a time and until it's 10 rounds total. So anytime there's less than 6 rounds in the autocannon, you can reload. You can do this whenever there's a slight lull in combat to keep it constantly topped off. So this is the next tip. So a little bit of a more hidden one that's going to be new to a lot of people, I imagine, is that if you missed the patch notes a couple of months back, we added a new button, keybind, for instant ammo type switching, which is a game changer for things like the autocannon. Because up to that point, basically, the only way to change your ammo type is to hold down reload, switch the thing, and then get out of the menu and then start firing again, which is extremely cumbersome. Well, you go to keybinds, whether it's controller or keyboard, then you go to a combat tab, and you'll see you want to look for weapon wheel or quick weapon wheel left. And that one is the one that you want to change the ammo modes instantly. Alright, now this next tip is another one that might be obvious to many, but it wouldn't be an autocannon video if I didn't talk about it. The ergonomic stat on this weapon is, leaves a bit to be desired. So what you want to do is pair the autocannon with the PIPBOY armor passive, okay? This is basically going to make you be able to change targets a lot faster. Be able to swap, you know, back and forth without having the weapon drag and wait for it to catch up. If you haven't tried it yet, it's kind of a game changer. I would give the autocannon another chance with the PIPBOY passive if you haven't already. And to get it, it's actually pretty easy. So if you don't already have the Viper Commando's Warbond and you want the medium variant, it's not even in the Warbond anyway. It's in the superstore for 150 super credits, and it should be permanently available as far as I know. So you can just browse through there to grab that and give it a quick try out. 150 super credits is pretty much nothing, so I think that's pretty fair. And then you know, go through and give that a go. The final thing I'll say about the autocannon, of course, is that it does have the feature of team reloading, which is honestly a slept-on feature in my opinion, but you know, it's hard enough to get somebody to want to run the autocannon period, much less a second person to help you team reload it. So you rarely see this in action, but I think it's pretty awesome. That's just me. I was planning on getting somebody to help me record footage for this, but I didn't get around to it, and I feel like I just want to get this video out. So here's the default tutorial footage. I will say one little tip: if you are planning on taking advantage of the team reloading, and if you do have access to the new shield throwables, the little portable shields, they are huge for team reloading tactics. That's like a game changer. Oh, where does the autocannon stack up today? Well, it's not as good as killing heavies as it used to be per se, but it's definitely really good at medium enemy control and chaff control. It's also good at taking out certain objectives, like I mentioned, the mortars, the spore spewers, the shrieker nests, the anti-air from the bots, variety of things like that. Bunker turrets from the bots as well, it can take out pretty effectively. So it's a versatile weapon still. If you go in with the mindset that this is sort of a jack of all trades, master of none weapon, and don't expect it to super excel at any one particular task, but give you the versatility to do a little bit of everything, then you're gonna have a good time. Alright, autocannon mains, leave your comment down below. Convert the non-believers.